Thank you. And thanks for joining us here today. Tell me, this is the first time some of us have seen you since you've been back from the Senate, maybe some people in this room. What's been the biggest surprise to you in Washington as somebody, it's your first elected position, but the Senate is some kind of crazy place sometimes. What's been the biggest surprise for you?
Honestly, after what we've seen, especially over the last few years, very little surprises me in Washington. One of the things that I am struck by is how much good you can get done in the Senate. It's frustrating. It's not easy. It takes a lot, as you know, to get a bill passed in the Senate. It is a place where parliamentary procedure is so incredibly complicated. But even beyond the legislation, there are things that a United States Senator can get done to move the ball a little bit forward. And I'm just honored every day to wake up and do that work. And every now and then there's a surprise, like a Warnock Cruz amendment. I didn't necessarily see that coming. But if there's a road that needs to get built in Texas that also needs to get built in Georgia, then we ought to get together and do it, even if we disagree on almost everything else. And I think that that's a lesson for our politics in general, that there's a way in which that there is a road that runs through all of our communities. And we all have a stake in building and maintaining that road that connects our humanity. And that's the spirit that I try to bring to government.
An issue that I know you care about has gotten caught up in some procedures and votes. Voting rights, the two bills that I know you're interested in, you're taking lead on, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and then also the For the People Act. Right now, the Democrats don't have the votes in the Senate to move those bills and to pass those bills. What do you do to get those passed in the Senate that you've got to work with?
Well, as the leader Schumer said right before we left, voting rights will be the first thing we take on when we get back to the Senate in September. And it's something that I and a group of us are working on right now through the recess. There was a vote in June, and shamefully, the Republicans blocked our effort to have a debate about the bill. And I think that's an important point to underscore, because I think in the kind of obtuse operations of the Senate, citizens who are busy doing their jobs might miss some of the nuances. I want you to be clear about what got blocked in June. Not the actual legislation, the ability to have a debate in front of the American people about voting rights in this moment. I mean, if there's anything that both sides of this kind of deeply polarized moment agree on, both in different ways are claiming that something needs to be addressed in our electoral system. So if both sides agree that there's something awry, why wouldn't we have a debate about that in front of the American people? And the folks who are blocking that debate, what's at stake in them trying to block that debate? So that's what got blocked in June. And I want you to be very clear about that. But I'm not about to give up on voting rights. We have to pass voting rights no matter what. And so we're working on a bill right now. I think it's important to have all 50 Democrats, not just on a framework, but on a bill. And our focus right now is getting the text of that written, which will include provisions both from the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and For the People. Get us all on the bill. And we will continue to invite our Republican friends to join us in that effort.
You know, I'll ask, should y'all get rid of the filibuster to move a bill that you think is that important?
I honestly think that we have to pass voting rights regardless of what we do with the filibuster. We have to pass voting rights no matter what. And you can do it. I mean, you can address the filibuster. There are other ways to address this. But I keep inviting our Republican brothers and sisters to join us in this effort. After all, the last time we passed the voting rights bill, I believe the year was 19 what year was that? 2000, no, that's the original bill. Wasn't that long. 2004, George W. Bush was president. It passed the Senate 98-0. And somewhere along the way, voting rights became a partisan issue. And, you know, I actually believe in democracy. Like, I believe in the noisy, rambunctious arguments we have and we get to have in America in the public square. And I like to see those arguments go forward and then have the people, after we've made the arguments, get a chance to weigh in. The four most powerful words in a democracy are the people have spoken. And I think shamefully over the last several years, with Georgia leading the way in many respects, we've seen a shameless, unabashed assault on the voices of ordinary people in the process. And so I think that we're going to be judged in this historic moment by what we do on this front. And I'm not about to lie down and allow this to happen without it being challenged. We can still pass voting rights, and you will see me and others continue to work on that front as we get back to the Senate.
You started out talking about COVID, and we have just here in Georgia had our 1 millionth case of COVID, but we still have stubbornly low vaccination rates. What more can the federal government do? Can the Senate do? And what else do you want to see happening here in the state to turn this tide back around?
I mean, we can go back to common sense and stop turning a pandemic into a political issue. I mean, when did viruses become partisan? Viruses don't know partisan divides. They don't know geographical divides. And so I think leaders need to be leaders in this moment. I think all of this is part of a larger moment in which there is deep suspicion for institutions in general. But we need folks all over the political spectrum to encourage people to get vaccinated. And I think we lead by example, and we put resources in the American Rescue Plan to help that to happen. And we're continuing to look for other ways to facilitate that. But the best thing you can do for your neighbors and for our businesses and our schools is to get vaccinated. And we have to remember that children under 12 still can't get vaccinated. And I feel this in a personal way because I have a precious 5-year-old daughter and a 2.5-year-old son, whom I love with all my heart. And the only protection they have is us getting vaccinated and wearing a mask. So do it.
We have seen the events unfolding in Afghanistan. I know you've been watching it closely as well. How do you rate the president's work on this so far? It's his first foreign policy crisis and really the first that you've been there for a part of as well.
Well, we've been in a 20-year endless war. And like most Americans and most Georgians, I think that these endless wars have not served us well. And so as we move forward, there will be plenty of time to talk about the process of the exit. But right now, I think we have to focus on the people who are on the ground, American citizens. We have to focus on our Afghan allies who are there helping us, and we got to get them out safely.
One item also that you talked about in your remarks is the effort that you have undertaken to help especially black farmers. There have been $5 billion passed in a previous Senate bill. I believe a court has put an injunction on that. How frustrating is that to you for a big piece of legislation, for that to move forward and for it to get stopped? And what can you tell those farmers about when help might actually be on the way?
Well, we've got to do everything to help all of our farmers. our small farmers and our socially disadvantaged farmers. And we can do both of those things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. I spent a lot of time during the campaign talking to farmers. I think about Lucius Abrams, who I met in Byronville, who has been trying to get relief for years. I think about some of the small farmers who are trying to figure out how to get their products to larger marketplace. The Justice Department tells us that they're going to defend the case, and so that will play out. In the meantime, I am a co-sponsor of a bill that will support small farmers, and we will be every bit as focused on that bill as we are on the other. We got to make sure that our farmers have the support that they need, and that helps them, and it helps all of us.
Okay. In addition to being a new U.S. Senator, you are also now a candidate for office in 2022. Just got to roll right into your re-election. There are a number of announced candidates. I don't know if you've heard, Herschel Walker is also batting around the idea of getting into that Senate race. How does it affect your strategy depending on who runs? People who we would expect, but even somebody that people didn't expect until
Not at
now.
all. Not at all. I'm really focused on being Georgia's United States Senator. I got elected 7 months ago. It's been a whirlwind of activity. And, if you hear me talk for a while, I'm going to bring up my dad. I had an older father. He was born in 1917. And he had a strong work ethic. And he told me, if somebody hires you to do a job, I had a little lawnmower business at one point as a kid. Somebody hires you to do a job, do the job they hired you to do. And so right now I'm focused on doing the job that Jordan's hired me to do, which is why I'm focused on getting this reconciliation bill passed when we get back, getting voting rights done, and trying to make sure that I do everything I can to respond to farmers, to make sure that our children have a path, because there's a path that I had to take to get here. Growing up in Savannah, Georgia, in public housing, first college graduate in my family, I had a sense of grit and determination. When my parents dropped me off for college, I didn't have enough money for the first semester. And I was looking at my dad to give me some money, and my dad used to speak to me in King James English because he was a preacher. So did my mom. Thou shalt wash the dishes, lest I smite thee with my rod and my staff. But he literally said, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I unto thee. The grace of God go with you. So gave me a big hug, got in the car and drove off. I graduated 4 years later with grit, determination, a serious work ethic, but also somebody gave me a Pell Grant. Somebody gave me some low interest student loans. As a preschooler, I'm a product of Head Start. What I'm saying to you is I know personally the difference that good federal legislation makes. And I'm deeply honored that I get to get up every day and work on that for ordinary people. And I hear there's a race next year.
Do you have concerns that the bill, that the state's new election bill will change the makeup of the voters down here? You've talked about it making it harder to vote. Will that actually affect the next election here in Georgia, in your opinion?
Oh, I think it impacts all of us. We should all be concerned about an assault on voting rights, regardless of our politics, because it impacts the policy, it impacts the kind of conversation that we have. And for me, it's really about the democracy. I honestly believe, as I said in my maiden speech, that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea, that all of us have within us a spark of the divine, that we have value. So our voice ought to be heard in the great debates about the direction and the destiny of our country. Ultimately, that's what's at stake for me. I think democracy is the best and last hope for humankind. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best human beings have. And so I'm going to fight for it.